Lesson 104, solving quadratic equations by completing the square. So what does it mean to complete the square? Completing the square means you're going to create a trinomial that's a perfect square trinomial. And so you need the format to be in x squared plus bx. And then to find your plus c, you need to take your b, divide it by 2, and square it. So if you see the example here, if our b is 6, if I put that in for b, so it'd be 6 divided by 2 and square it, half of 6 is 3, and then you square the 3, it gives you your 9. That's your perfect square trinomial right here, so you get a binomial that's squared. So that is our goal, so then we can be able to solve for x in a later step. So let's look at an example here. This one, completing the square, x squared plus 8x. You can see that there's nothing right here. What are we going to add to that? That's what they want you to do. And so you're going to take your b, which is 8, divide that in half, which is 4. 4 squared is 16. This is your now perfect square trinomial. So let's look at an example ourselves. So I have x squared minus 12x. We need to add a number here, complete the square. So I need to follow the format, b divided by 2 and squared. So if I substitute my numbers in, that would be a negative 12 divided by 2 squared. Negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. Negative 6 squared is a positive 36. Next one, x squared plus 24x plus what completes the square? So again, I take my b, which is 24. I divide it by 2, which is 12. 12 squared is 144. So that would be completing the square. And to prove that this is a perfect square trinomial, I can just factor that out. What do I multiply to get 144? If I add them together, it gives me 24 is x plus 12 plus x plus 12, which just gives me a binomial of x plus 12 squared. Second example, solve x squared plus bx equals c. So the only difference in this problem is that our c is on the other side. We're still going to complete the square like we just did, but whatever we did on one side, we need to do on the others, add the same number to the other side. We're going to add that to c. Then we solve for x. So let's take a look at an example here. Here we have x squared minus 8x equals 9. So I have x squared minus 8x plus, it's going to be a negative 8 divided by 2 squared equals our 9 plus the same thing, negative 8 divided by 2 squared. So now half of negative 8 is negative 4. Negative 4 squared is 16. So I have x squared minus 8x plus 16 equals 9 plus 16. Now let's factor this trinomial. Since we know it's a perfect square trinomial, what do I multiply to get 16? If I add them together, it gives me a negative 8. That would be a negative 4. This side will give me a positive 25. Now to solve for x, I need to undo this square. To undo this square, I need to find the square root. Square root of x minus 4 squared is x minus 4. Whatever I do on one side, I must do on the other. So I need to find the square root of 25. And remember, when we can find the square root of 25 from a previous lesson, you get a positive 5 and you get a negative 5. Because 5 squared is 25, a negative 5 squared is also 25. Now we solve for x. So I need to add 4 to both sides. And I get my two answers. X can be a positive 9, and a negative 1. Those would be our two values for x. Let's look at the next example. X squared plus 2x equals 8. I need to complete the square. So x squared plus 2x plus 2 divided by 2 squared equals 8 plus 2 divided by 2 squared. Now let's simplify this side. I end up with x squared plus 2x. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. This side, 8 plus 1. So now let's factor this trinomial since I know it's a square. What do I multiply to get 1? But add them together gives me 2. That's a plus 1. This side equals 9. To undo a square, find the square root of both sides. So now I have x plus 1 equals a positive and a negative 3. Now to get x by itself, subtract 1 on all the sides. I get the answers of x equaling positive 2 and a negative 4. These would be my two answers. If you wanted to double check to see if those are correct, I can plug those numbers in for x in my equation. The 2 squared is 4, plus 2 times 2 is 4. 4 plus 4 is 8, so I know that is correct. Negative 4 for x, negative 4 squared is a positive 16. 2 times a negative 4 is a negative 8. So 16 minus 8 is 8. That's just a quick way of checking your answer. These next two problems I'm going to have you do yourself for extra practice. Example 3, solve ax squared plus bx plus c by completing the square. You can see that the only difference with this one now is there's an a number in front of the x squared that's not a 1. And in order to complete the square, we need to make sure that the x squared has a coefficient of 1. So you can look in the example here, their first step was to divide by the coefficient, divide everything by the coefficient. So they divide everything by 4. So it gives you your trinomial, gives you your x squared with a coefficient of 1. Then we complete the square. So that's what they did on the next step. And then they were able to solve for x by getting rid of the square. And you can see down over here that they end up having an answer of x can being a negative 4.45 or a positive 0.45. So let's take an example of one of our problems. Here I have 3x squared minus 12x equals 54. I need to make this an x squared, so I divide everything by 3. So I end up with x squared minus 4x equaling a negative 18. Now I need to complete the square, so I have x squared minus 4x plus negative 4 divided by 2 squared equals a negative 18 plus negative 4 divided by 2 squared. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4. So now I have x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals negative 18 plus 4. So now I have, if I factor this side, x minus 4, not x minus 4, x minus 2 squared. Because a negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. Negative 2 plus negative 2 is negative 4. This side I have a negative 14. Now to solve, I need to find the square roots of both sides. But you notice we have a problem. We cannot find the square root of a negative number. So that's a clue that there is no solution for this problem. Let's look at the next one. I have a coefficient of 3 in front of my x squared, so I need to get rid of that by dividing it by 3. Divide the next term by 3 and the last term by 3. So I end up with x squared plus 4x plus, I got 4 over 2 divided squared equals 42 divided by 3 would be 14. And then I have to add to that one to complete the square, 4 over 2 divided by 2. Now I have x squared plus 4x. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. So equals 14 plus 4 is 18. Now I can complete the square, or factor the trinomial. So I have x plus 2 squared, because 2 times 2 is 4, 2 plus 2 is 4, equals 18. Undo a square, I find the square root of both sides. So I have x plus 2 equals a positive and a negative square root of 18. So I need to subtract 2 on both sides. Now to solve this one, I'm going to get my calculator out again. So now I have a negative 2 plus square root of 18. That gives me an answer of 2.24264. So remember, if they don't tell you what to round it to 3 decimal places. So that would be 2.243 because the 6 tells you to round the 2 up to 3. So 2.243. 2.243 is one answer. So it's about. You use the squiggly equal sign. And the other side, so now we have to subtract the two numbers. So let's get our calculator back out. So it's going to be a negative 2, not plus the square root of 18. It's going to be minus the square roots of 18. And that's going to give us an answer of a negative 6.2426. So I round to 3 decimal places. The 6 tells me to round the 3 up, or the 2 up to 3. So it's going to be a negative 6.243. And those would be our answers. You may work on these next two yourself for extra practice. Moving on to the application. The application, the length of a rectangle is 12 feet more than its width. The total area of the rectangle is 64 square feet. What are the dimensions of the rectangle? Well, area of a rectangle is length times width equals the area. They told us that the length is 12 feet more than its width. So the length is the width plus 12, and the width is W. This has to equal 64 square feet. So my first step is to distribute the W. So now I have W squared plus 12W. And I'm going to do the plus blank because we're going to have to complete the square, equals 64 plus the blank. So what do we put in our blank to complete the square? It's our B divided by 2 squared. So our B divided by 2 squared. So now I have W squared plus 12W. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 6 squared is 36. So this is 64 plus 36, which is 100. Now to complete, to factor this, I know it's a perfect square trinomial. So Positive 6 times a positive 6 is 36. 6 plus 6 is 12. This will equal 100. This is squared over here. So now, to undo a square, I find the square roots of both sides. And now I have w plus 6 equals a positive 10 and a negative 10. Now to solve for this, I need to subtract 6 on all the sides. That gives me an answer. The width, remember, can only give me a positive answer. So 10 minus 6 gives me 4. So I know the width has to be 4. It cannot be a negative 16. So I know that's not right. So now I put my 4 back into this W here. 4 plus 12 is 16. So the length has to be 16. And I can check my answer by taking 16 times 4. That does give me 64, which is what I had here as my area. So these are the dimensions of the rectangle. You may do this next one yourself. The only tricky thing about this one is you need to know how to find the area of a parallelogram. The area of a parallelogram is base times height equals the area. So I'll write that down for you. Base times the height equals the area. Your assignment for next time is lesson 104, numbers 1, 5, 8, 10, and 17.